All right, Ryan Kalkbrenner has been kind of the Mr. Consistent of college basketball over the last 3 years. I feel like I've heard him constantly talked about. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride in terms of actually coming out, but coming out to the draft, I should say. Anyways, Kalkbrenner with a really got to pronounce that L in there. Kalkbrenner is a January 17th, 2002 birthday. We are finally talking about someone older than me. This is a blessing. So I will obviously be very high on Ryan Kalkbrenner just for that. But he's a January 17th, 2002 birthday. So he's 23. He will turn 24 about halfway through his rookie season. But because the rookie season age cutoff is February, his rookie season will be his age 24 season. So he is an old rookie in the vein of someone who I will bring up quite a bit with Kalkbrenner, just to be honest, and who I probably should have brought up a little bit more with someone like Raynaud, who I was pretty in on, kind of in the vein of like a Colin Castleton, age-wise and in some ways production-wise too. Again, he's had a very prolific NCAA career. This season as a senior, he averaged 19.2 points, 8.7 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 0.5 steals, and 2.7 blocks per game. 65.3% overall field goal percentage, 34.4% from three, 68.1% free throw percentage. And he has been, like I said, kind of Mr. Consistent. Last year, also as a senior, this was technically his fifth-year senior. He was a fifth-year senior. 17.3 points per game, 7.6 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 0.4 steals, 3.1 blocks, 1.5 turnovers on very, very similar efficiency stats. The free throw percentage was a little higher. His junior season, couple less minutes, couple less points, one less rebound. Everything else stays pretty consistent. The blocks were lower. He has averaged 1.4 or 1.5 turnovers per game every year of his career, except for his freshman season where he played much less. He shot 64.6% from the field twice over the course of his career. And for what it's worth, we'll talk about the free throw number and its ups and downs. But he did have a 3-year stretch where he shot 73.6, 79.5, 71.1 on like solid volume there. So that is worth noting. This year, he kind of took the step to be Creighton's lead scorer. In the past, he'd kind of been more of like an ancillary guy at times, playing off. He's been on some really, really good Creighton teams, and he's contributed to winning for a lot of years. And that really shows up. This last season, is still his kind of creme de la creme, the best year of his career. 11.1 box plus minus, 129.2 offensive rating, 22.3 usage rate, 67.8 effective field goal rate, 68.4 true shooting, 8.8 offensive rebound rate, 18.4 defensive rebound rate. That is something we will talk about, but that's a fairly low number. 10% assist rate, 11.2% turnover rate. This was his first year having a positive assist to turnover ratio, though, where he had a 1.1, 7.3 block rate, 0.9 steal rate, 38.6 free throw rate. His superpower, though, 1.6 fouls committed per 40. And that's been a consistent theme. He's basically never in foul trouble over the course of his whole college career. He dunked 107 times, which is 20 more than he had the season before. Shot 79.5% on close twos. He's never shot below 74% from on close twos, for what it's worth. He did take a step down in terms of long twos, shooting only 38.2%. In the past, he had shot in the 50s. Free throw percentage, like I mentioned, took a step down. And then while the 3-point number was good this year, this was the most he's ever taken at 61. He's never really been like any type of volume shooter. The shooting has always kind of been just like an up and down thing for him. The place to start here is the defense. I think the whole sell for Kalkbrenner is that he is just a really solid rim protector who has a long track record of being a very efficient offensive big man. But the key to decipher there is just how good of a rim protector is he? Because, and we'll talk about this, he's not any type of hub offensively. He's not like a dirty work big man who's going to, win with toughness and getting you extra possessions as an offensive rebounder or anything like that. He is a primarily a play finishing role guy who is not like a crazy high flyer, who is going to be a high level rim protector on the other end. His cell is high level rim protector. It's not mobility. It's not anything else. Stone, how did you feel about the rim protection?
I think what really makes Kalkbrenner the one of the best rim protectors is the hand placement. Like, he has just such elite hand placement as a rim protector, and it's why he doesn't foul much. He's so good at putting his hands exactly where they need to be to contest, to get his hand on the ball that's coming up for a shot. Like, he's just so good at that without fouling. That's really what makes him a great rim protector. Everything else is what I struggle with when it comes to how good it is. The biggest thing with him is, for as long as he's been in college, since he was probably someone that we talked about in the first year of Upside Swings, to be honest. He hasn't put on any weight whatsoever in a meaningful way. He has put on weight, but it hasn't come to in a way that is functional strength that he's utilizing, and it's evident in especially on the other end of the court, but even defensively, where people just finish through him. He's not strong enough. He can't defend post ups at all, and he just gets bullied out the way too often for me to feel confident in him being this sort of primary rim protector. He is decent at moving from side to side within the paint, like as someone that can get from one side of the rim to the other. He's okay directionally changing in the air, but he is not someone you want out on the perimeter. And again, even if he is out on the perimeter, he's getting bullied sometimes by like guards all the way to the rim. Like, he's just that weak, and it's going to sound mean, but that's what he is, to be able to defend a lot of these shots. He can't establish any positioning whatsoever as a rebounder. And if you look outside of this year, like, he never had it as a 7'1" guy, like never had any rebounding years above like 7 rebounds a game. And this year was different. I think it was, to be honest, like a lot of teammates that were boxing out for him, and he was able to come in and get boards because they established position. But in no world do I see him being any sort of positive rebounder in the NBA, despite his massive height. I don't know. It's just the lack of strength is such. It's we talked about it with Raynaud, but it's not even to that level. It's like a shockingly a shocking lack of strength that is just evident in pretty much every area.
Yeah, for the style of rim protector that he is, where he's not hypermobile in the first place. And to me, the big sell defensively is his verticality is just probably second to none of any big I've ever seen. Like, he almost overdoes it because he's so skinny and he doesn't want to foul, that he is just straight up and down like every single time. And he's really good about hand placement, like you talked about, Stone, when he does decide to go for a block, but he's almost too hesitant to try and block shots in the first place because he'd rather stay vertical, contest without fouling. And I can appreciate that. But if you're going to play that kind of very like stay in one place, not move a ton, just let them come to you, or you're kind of, he keeps people away. He has a ton of rim deterrence because he's just such a threat around the rim. And there were games in college where he just evaporate any attempt by anybody around the rim. But you can't be that immobile and that skinny and play in an NBA scheme. If you're going to play this kind of like deep drop kind of big, you have to be stronger, right? You have to be able to take bumps from guards. like real guards, not Terquavion Smith guards, and not just get completely thrown to the ground. I think NBA strength-based creators are going to go right through him. I think normal sized guards are going to be able, 30-year-old men are going to be able to put a shoulder into him and move him out of the way. And he's not mobile enough to be like Nick Claxton where he can recover and get back into a play, or you play him higher at the level. He has to play in like a deep, deep drop. And even then in college, he's just like trapped under the basket. He just stands there, and that you just can't do that in the league. And if he was slightly more mobile or slightly stronger, I think I'd be in. But you're a 23-year-old man who can't put on muscle, apparently. Like, what are we doing here? It just and I get it, the stats, the rim deterrence, it's all cool. And I think there's something there with the defense. But if there's any amount of question marks with a fifth-year rim protection only prospect, if that is your only sell as a fifth-year senior, it's so hard. You have to be so perfect, and he's pretty far from perfect, in my opinion.
Yeah, so something I should have mentioned, does have really good measurements, right? 7'1" without shoes. So he's going to have, he's going to be an easy 7'2" list. 9'4" standing reach, 7'6" wingspan. He was of the whole combine, he was the, tied, not even tied. He was third all on his own for standing reach, below Malawak and Zakarski, Zakarski's just, kind of a giant. So there's some good stuff there with Kalkbrenner. I mean, he, being legitimately that big is huge. I mean, he's the same size as Maxime Raynaud, height-wise, but he's longer and can just reach higher, and that does matter, like even given his skinniness. I really like Coop mentioned, I don't want to undersell it. The verticality is great. And that you mentioned like the style of rim protector. And I think it's important to note that he is really good as a rim protector at guarding when guys are sort of funneled a certain way and defenders can kind of stick on them. And he is the low man. He's not great at guarding in like a pure drop right now. He does get higher up than like a Sorber. Like his drops are deep a lot of the time, but like he actually would sometimes get higher up. But he's not a great, drop guy technique wise. He lets guys get behind him quite a bit. He will sometimes, expose his top foot a little bit too much and force himself into recovery on guards. And he'll get away with that some in college in a way he just won't in the NBA. And, for what it's worth, like there's something to be said for a fairly consistent track record of dominance as a defensive player. He's I don't have the stats pulled up, but there's a lot that points to like his defensive, impact being really good. Now, the thing I'll point to with Kalkbrenner that I want to spend some time on is defensive metrics are really hard, and more than offensive metrics, like sample size really matters. I really don't take anything from single season college defensive metrics in terms of all-in-one impact metrics. Even if you combine like multiple college seasons, it's still sort of iffy for me. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, college defense tends to be a lot more dependent on scheme surrounding talent and stuff like that than the NBA. Versus like in the NBA, lots of times it's, hey, the big is going to kind of do the pride. We're going to build our defense, around this big. And college is a little bit more, scheme day-to-day stuff that's just not the same, because in the NBA, you don't necessarily scout game to game in the same way. There's also just the truth. I think the most impactful metrics when you look at things like in the NBA, when you're looking at rim protectors, is percentage of shots opponents take at the rim, percentage of shots that you contest at the rim, and what opponents shoot on those shots. Those aren't as readily available for college rim protectors. It's just the truth. NBA teams probably have that, and if I have the time to hand track every single one of these guys, I could probably figure that out, but I don't. So I'm kind of stuck with being a little bit more anecdotal. And my anecdotal take is Kalkbrenner was a great college rim protector, but it's worth noting that he is 23. And even though he's done this for a couple of years now, that transition from college to the NBA is still really hard. And I'm not certain that he will have the type of athleticism and maneuverability for that to translate in the right way. Now, what I will say is there is a world that he ends up in that top echelon of NBA rim protectors. I really do think there is. And why I think that is, despite the skinniness, there is some real balance and some good paint maneuverability. And he's also proven that he can get to a point where he is so good technically that he is really hard to scheme out of a game. Which is all that stuff is really, really important at the college level, especially when you consider that he's not like a dominating offensive big. Like Edey was hard to scheme out of a game because even if you could score on him quite a bit, you could, he was going to get that back on offense just by posting up, right, and drawing that gravity in the post. Kalkbrenner was a really good and efficient offensive player, but he was not like a post hub in that way. So, I do think there's something to be said for, maybe we're just overthinking it and the tools and the production are good enough here. But I also understand your guys' concerns. And it is true that anytime someone could get, especially when he's guarding a main action like in pick and roll, or if he's guarding dribble handoffs, if he gets bumped off of his line, like he really struggles as a rim protector. When he can meet guys at the rim, he's great. Even stronger guys, he's still getting good contests. But if he has to get up a little bit and he's getting bumped as he's going, it's a lot worse. So you're going to have to work on scheming. You might have to pre-switch actions to keep him out of the main action. But then, hey, if they're pre-switching and they're putting a shooter in the corner, can you have a guy who can guard two while, Kalkbrenner will have to recover up to his guy or whatever? But all of a sudden you're talking about having to scheme against him. And I will say, he couldn't do the Rudy Gobert, switching stuff. Like Rudy Gobert and even Mitchell Robinson and really the highest level NBA rim protectors can switch way better than I think Kalkbrenner can. He just doesn't have that level of mobility. The hips aren't quick enough. When he is stuck on the perimeter, he can just kind of be, baiting guys to take jump shots and then trying to contest from there. And while you can get away with that, I'm not sure that I think NBA players will be much better getting those off. You compare his switch possessions to Raynaud's, and I think it's pretty night and day. Like Kalkbrenner's switch possessions just look way worse. So all that stuff is an important piece of the puzzle. But I do think just the straight rim protection, especially in help side scenarios, is great. And I do think that's worth noting. You guys have any final thoughts on the defense? And if not, Coop, do you want to transition us to talking a little bit about the offense?
I don't have anything else on the defense. Stone, you good? Okay. The offense. I guess technically there's some funk with him as a really good touch scorer, on the interior, and maybe some of that can translate out. But the shooting stuff has just been so inconsistent over his years. He can, there was a season where it's oh, is this guy actually a good free throw shooter? And then he just regressed. And I just don't think his touch is as good as the numbers suggest. I think he's just really tall and scores a lot really close to the basket. As a finisher, he's only had one season below 76% at the rim. And that was, I think his sophomore year where he only scored 73%. Oh no, that's a disgusting number. But I just think that he plays in a scheme and with players who can get him set up right next to the rim. And I think he just really knows his angles, around the rim, where he can get to his spots, how to score from those specific spots. But there's been almost no growth with him in terms of self-creation. There's a little bit more this year, a little bit more post stuff. But the touch, I just don't buy that really being a long-term indicator of any kind of a shot. And he doesn't really pass the ball in any meaningful sense. He doesn't really create anything. I don't think he's a good DHO operator. I don't think he has a functional enough handle to do, maybe more than completely wide open get downhill. And even then he's just not super athletic in a north-south sense. And he's not very good at putting the ball on the deck when he's moving forward. So he's just not super useful to a lot of modern NBA teams unless you are just running a super, super pick and roll heavy scheme. And even then he's not getting on top of the rim, throwing down everything. You can't just throw the ball up. and he'll bring it and put it in from anywhere. He can't play out of the short roll because there's just not enough versatility there. So you're looking at a guy who's just a good finisher. And at that point, I just don't think he's athletic enough to play as like a full-time rim runner in the NBA. Like, that's a pretty high bar of athleticism. Even if you're going to run him as just like I don't think his touch is as good as a guy like Walker Kessler, right? Where Kessler is like legitimately really good finisher, right? Because his touch is just incredible and he's massive. And if you just get him close to the basket, that's a pretty good shot. I don't think Kalkbrenner's that level of interior scorer. And I don't think he's the same level as Kessler was as a prospect. You know, Kessler's also, they're about the same age. Kessler might even still be younger than him. Like, it's pretty crazy. So I don't know. There's not any sell for long-term potential, and there's almost nothing that he does that I super value offensively at the NBA level. So I mean, I get the appeal from a just pure impact standpoint, but he's also not grabbing a ton of offensive rebounds. Despite being super ground bound and playing right next to the rim, he's not like a crazy read rebounds coming off the rim kind of guy, just like clean a bunch of stuff up. So like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing on the floor other than just rolling? And if that's all you do, it's pretty easy for you to be schemed out, like defensively, when real games happen and you're playing against real teams, especially if you're not that strong. You know, like, you can't like deep seal a guy off of a post up or out of the pick and roll and then get a decent shot or kick out, or you can't immediately turn a pick and roll into another DHO or into some grenade action. There, like, if you can't do any of this stuff, like I don't think Kalkbrenner can, then you're just not super useful as a modern NBA big. The bar for rim runners is a lot higher than just finishing shots. And I don't think Kalkbrenner meets the bars in any other areas offensively, personally. So if you guys have anything nice to say, this would be a good time to say it.
I'll say the biggest meaningful development, I would say, physically at least, for him has been the acceleration, where I think in transition he's a lot more of a threat than he previously was, because he's, for his height relative, he has pretty good acceleration in the open court, and I think that showed itself in transition at points this year. But apart from that, like, I'm with Coop where the touch isn't good. It's not like I really buy Raynaud's touch, and Raynaud can't get to the rim because he's real thin. Kalkbrenner can't get to the rim because he's even thinner and has even less strength, and the touch is like fairly worse than Raynaud, in my opinion. But Cooper does bring a good point up where I think he does understand angles extremely well, where I think he really knows how to get the ball off the glass or get little nifty baby hooks that are just the right angle where he knows he can get them. But he struggles creating space in the paint. If it's not like a spoon-fed sort of shot opportunity for him, if he has to create his own in any sense, it's just not really going to happen because he can't really gain any sort of positioning in the paint with the lack, especially of lower body strength. And he can't create space with like post-ups or any post moves. But he has broad shoulders, so he puts his head down a lot and he just swings his shoulders around to try and create space a lot of times. And he has to resort to that because he can't create space with his lower body, but it results in him being he tends to not have a great sense of direction when he comes up from putting his head down to put a shot up. And he's like almost disoriented from where the rim is relative to where he is. And a lot of times it comes up with some wild misses because he's looking at the floor right before he puts the shot up. I don't buy the shot from deep by any means. It's not really made any sort of significant improvement over the time he's been in college, at least on film for me, to really buy it translating to the next level. The touch is just not there. And the passing, I would say, is like actively just not good. He cannot read help defenses as a passer. He just sees a man that's currently open, tries to get it to them without reading anybody trying to jump passing lanes or where any other defender is on the court, just where whether the man he's looking at to pass the teammate is open or not, and doesn't really give much consideration to anything else. So it really makes him difficult to find anything that he hangs his hat on offensively other than being like just sort of this easy looks kind of big that has to be sort of spoon fed in every circumstance to get buckets, because I don't think there's any sort of creation viability there in any level.
Yeah, I mean, this is another place where I do feel like I may be coming across higher than you guys on Kalkbrenner. I think he is just legitimately just really good, kind of finding space in the paint. Now, for what it's worth, I think Greg McDermott. I wanted to call him Doug, but Doug is the young one. Greg McDermott is one of the best offensive coaches in basketball. I watch a ton of Creighton, as a coach, just to watch their offense and understand how they're getting certain shots. And he created Kalkbrenner a lot of really wide open looks. Kalkbrenner's played with good guards his whole career too. He played with a Nemhard. He played with Stephen Ashworth. He's played with what was his name? Trey Alexander. He's played with good guards forever. He's almost always played with a good passing guard. He's played with good spacing, good gravity around him. Probably better spacing than anyone we've talked about in the draft this year. I think a lot of people talk about that Duke team as having great spacing, but I think we forget that Sion James was not guarded from three. And obviously Colin Malalock not guarded from three. And there were times that Coop wasn't even properly guarded from three, right? Not to mention Mason Gilson, whatever. I mean, Creighton was, even Jemiah Neal was guarded from three pretty consistently. And then they had a couple guys. I mean, there were times where Stephen Ashworth teams would be in a complete no threes defense with him. They were like begging him to put the ball on the floor and drive to the rim and try and score that way. And then Ashworth was good at finding Kalkbrenner. I mean, the stat profile is great offensively, but I don't want it to get twisted. Like, a lot of that is great offense around him. He doesn't really do a ton to create for himself. He dunked a lot, which is nice. He was in the 98th percentile at the rim. He was in the 87th percentile on post-ups, which is good. But he did turn the ball over 10.7% of the time on post-ups. Basically, the thing with him is he's just crazy efficient. He's in the 86th percentile or better in basically every offensive category you could imagine. Roll finishes, putbacks, post-ups, all the type of stuff that he was asked to do, he was great at, and he was not asked to do anything he was bad at. And that in some ways is good, but it's also in some ways a worry to me that he is this old and he wasn't, like playing with like a ton of decision-making load still. I mean, they were, which is, again, fine in a sense that in the NBA, he's not going to be asked to play with a ton of decision-making load. And I think he's a fine decision maker. He gets tunnel vision. He's not a very good passer, but he executes well enough, right? He does what he's supposed to do. He clearly understands and knows what is supposed to happen next while running a fairly complex offense. And that is sometimes a lot for a human that's 7'2". So like, I understand all these things, and I think they point to him having real potential to grow and be solid in the NBA. But I don't know what the special is. I don't think he's a good enough leaper to be like a really elite role man in the NBA. I don't think the touch is good enough for him to be like an elite, like one dribble scorer on post-ups and I agree with Stone that he doesn't fight for space on duck-ins very well. There's nothing here that really like excites me. I think he can be fine enough for who he could be defensively. But that's with the caveat again that he's pretty old. And with the shot, what I'll say is, even if he makes some shots in the NBA, I don't think he's the valuable type of stretch five. I don't think he's going to make enough to be worth it for him to just stand on the perimeter instead of using his gravity as a big human rolling to the rim. And he's never going to be able to attack closeouts. He can't dribble. He can't make decisions on the move. He can't really get downhill. He's not that kind of athlete. He does have just like a weird lack of like north-south athleticism too, that combines with the lack of strength. It's just, I don't know. All this combines to like, I'm not excited about him, but I also like, I struggle with where to rank him because I can't deny that he is good. And I think there's a real path to him being a starting NBA big. And that is hard for me to like parse because certain guys I don't necessarily buy the path to starting as much. So like I like Sorber, and Sorber's way younger and I think has more potential and upside than Kalkbrenner. But there's also a world that Sorber never gets to be as good as Kalkbrenner is right now. And that's kind of like the question for me in some ways is where does that value fall? And I'm just not sure yet. I definitely draft him. I'd probably give him a real contract because I think there's a world he's not an NBA. Like there's a world that his floor is like ninth big, or whatever, like that he's not really in the league. But I think at the very least we've seen, and I hate to do the white to white comparison, but guys like Luke Cornett or I'm blanking on his name, but there is something to be said for just being gigantic and competent. And I think he's going to be in that tier for me with Asa Newell and Thomas Sorber, which I know is higher than you guys. But I can't be so low on him because there's just too much here to latch onto. It'd be one thing if the rim protection was actively bad and he was just giant, or he was a good defensive player but an inefficient offensive player, or he was someone who, even though he's limited offensively, like didn't ever have to execute anything complicated. Like he does just enough to like pass all these thresholds for me that I kind of am going to turn a blind eye to the age. But I also don't know how much better he can get. Like I think we're going to know on Kalkbrenner early. Like you'll draft him and get him into camp and be like, oh man, he just can't hang with these athletes. And like how strong all these guys around him are that are just going to kill him all the time. Like it just doesn't matter. So I think that's a fair argument against him. But I don't know. He's so technically sound on both ends. And he does a good job getting the most out of what he has. And what he has is legitimately great size. And so I think that is tough for me to pass on. Coop, Stone?
Yeah, for me at least, the answer how much better Kalkbrenner can get is somewhat the proof is in the pudding, because he hasn't really sure that the stats have fluctuated throughout his collegiate career, but if you watch the film, he really hasn't developed much as a player, in my opinion. He's had, 5 years now, and he seems like the same player. Really, that we talked about him. I know for sure in the 2023 class, that draft cycle, and it feels like I'm talking about the same exact player. And obviously I am, but in terms of just the skill sets and everything that he does and doesn't do on the court, he just hasn't really improved, and that's a red flag for me. And he is a pretty old age for draft. I struggle to see him as being any sort. I can't get there with any sort of confidence thinking that he's an NBA player confidently. For me, he's in the same tier as Johni Broome, as I would maybe consider giving him a two-way contract. He wouldn't be a priority two-way for me, but I would maybe consider it depending on the team. But there's just not much there for me to buy into offensively, especially, and then defensively. He's a legitimately great rim protector at the collegiate level, being multiple years older than most of his competition. And when he gets to the NBA against much better and stronger athletes, I just don't think it's going to translate to the level of success that he's had thus far. So I can't really get there with him, and I'm going to probably keep him in that tier of would maybe consider giving him a two-way, which is currently 27th on my board, but I have a long way to go.
I think that there's potential value as a second rounder, but this is a guy who is getting the most out of his limited tools other than his size, right? He's limited mobility wise, limited strength wise. he's not super like crazy flexible. He gets the most out of his size and hand-eye coordination. And I just don't think that he's going to get the amount of I don't think that what he does is valuable enough to be schemed for in the same way in the NBA. And maybe if he goes to like the Lakers and he gets to play with Luka, who can make him get easy shots 400 times a game, and he plays in a simple defensive scheme where they just funnel towards him and he gets to basically clean up mistakes for a guy like that, like bad point of attack defense, then maybe he's like a backup center. But I don't think that he is ever going to reach the point where he's worth completely constructing a defense around to maximize his limited tool. Those tools aren't good enough at the NBA level. And so while I can, and I just don't know how much better they're going to get, because like Stone said, it's 5 years of college play time and you're the same guy. You couldn't even like go to CrossFit and put on some pounds and then come back and just, body these guys in a completely new way. It's really a worry. And I just can't get behind taking this guy in the first round when there's guys who I believe could supply, serious actual playoff rotation level value, even potentially like a guy like Sorber is functionally a worse player. But if 2 or 3 things, small things click for him, I think he's a far more valuable player than Kalkbrenner. Even if he's a worse player, I think what he does is far more valuable. And because of his motor, because of his youth, because of his more special athletic traits, those are just more amplified than a guy like Kalkbrenner, whose limitations just kind of hold back his ceiling, especially as like a specialist. If you are a specialist in the truest sense of the word, you have to be special if you're this old. And I just don't see it enough with him. So I have him in the second round. I have him below Penda and Ace Bailey, but above a guy like Saraf, who's a bit more intangible than Kalkbrenner.
Yeah, I think you guys are convinced me. I'll probably move him down to the Jaeger, Demon, Ben Saraf tier. That's you're right in the sense that maybe I'm overthinking the upside, in the fact that he's never quite got to be that dominating level of player, and specifically the decision making never really took some gigantic leap, but anyways, that's all we got. We hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to like and subscribe and hit that bell as well, as the draft season rolls along. If you hit that, then you're going to get updates on everything we're doing. So I hope you guys enjoy. This has been the Upside Swings to be a Draft podcast. We hope we hit our ceiling. Thank you.
Conversation.
We were like, what are you talking about? Yeah, Cooper and I were talking, actively talking, and you hadn't even said a word yet. You log onto the call and just burp loud as fuck. This is what happens when you invite LA people on the podcast. They just have no manners.
Yeah, absolutely no manners, dude. Go back to the West Coast.
Well, one time we had a podcast and Bryce was burping.
Oh my god, that was that up.
Wait, what?
Dude, I remember someone was talking and I thought I was muted and I was on a different tab looking up stats and I burped super loud and I heard you guys go silent for 5 seconds and I clicked back on and realized that I had not muted myself and I felt really bad. That was not a very good look for me, but
it's okay.
All right, you have your back of the video content now.
There we go.
Fuck.
I farmed content.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
Okay.